The problem is that the way Bush has done it over the last 8 years is to take out a credit card from the Bank of China in the name of our children, driving up our national debt from $5 trillion for the first 42 presidents. Number 43 added $4 trillion by his lonesome, so that we now have over $9 trillion of debt that we are going to have to pay back. $30,000 for every man, woman, and child. That's irresponsible. It's unpatriotic.
This has been the fiscally most irresponsible administration that we have seen. I mean, we have increased the national debt, almost doubled it since George Bush took office. It is now over $9 trillion. And that is money that we're all going to have to pay back. Second principle is a very simple principle called pay-go. If you want to cut taxes, you've got to cut spending. If you want to raise spending, you've got to raise revenue so that you have honest accounting. Right now, the federal budget is not honest. And unless we have good numbers, we can't end up dealing with this budget. Now, the biggest problem we have in terms of our budget, though, long term, and look, I want to eliminate no-bid contracts. I want to scrub the federal budget free of earmarks and pet projects that are not based on our national priorities. And that requires transparency in government. I talked earlier about the power of technology. One of the things that we've done, you'll be pleased to know that we call this the Google for Government bill.
Google is in favor of it.
Yes. And what it does is we're going to set up a searchable database for every dollar of federal spending so that we can track it, which means that we'll be able to, journalists and ordinary citizens and think tanks and advocacy groups will be able to see if money is going to a bridge to nowhere instead of going to a bridge to somewhere. We'll be able to challenge it in real time, and that's going to be important.
How can the Republican majority in this Congress explain to their constituents that trillions of dollars of new debt is good for our economy? How can they explain that they think it's fair to force our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren to finance this debt through higher taxes? That's what it'll have to be. Why is it right to increase our nation's dependence on foreign creditors? They should explain this. Maybe they can convince the public they're right. I doubt it. Because most Americans know that increasing debt is the last thing we should be doing. After all, I repeat, the baby boomers are about to retire. Under the circumstances, any credible economist would tell you we should be reducing debt, not increasing it. Democrats won't be making arguments to support this legislation, which will weaken our country. Weaken our country. We're being asked to do what shouldn't be asked of us. To increase the debt to almost $9 trillion. I hope everyone walking down to these desks today will understand what they're doing. What they're doing to our country. On this side of the aisle, we know. Thank you, Madam President.
Raising by another $2.4 trillion.
It has to be raised, we'll raise it.
Thank you, Mr. President. As you well know, sir, finding votes for the debt ceiling can sometimes be complicated. You yourself, as a member of the Senate, voted against a debt ceiling increase. And in previous aspects of American history, President Reagan in 1985, President George Herbert Walker Bush in 1990, President Clinton in 1997, all signed deficit reduction deals that were contingent upon or in the context of raising the debt ceiling. You yourself 4 times have done that. 3 times, those were related to deficit reduction or budget maneuvers. What Chuck and I think many people are curious about is this new adamant desire on your part not to negotiate when that seems to conflict with the entire history, the modern era of American presidents and the debt ceiling, and your own history on the debt ceiling. And doesn't that suggest that we are going to go into a default situation because no one is talking to each other about how to resolve this?
Well, no, Major. I think if you look at the history, getting votes for the debt ceiling is always difficult. And budgets in this town are always difficult. I went through this just last year. But what's different is we never saw a situation, as we saw last year, in which certain groups in Congress took such an absolutist position that we came within a few days of defaulting. And you know, the fact of the matter is that we have never seen the debt ceiling used in this fashion, where the notion was, you know what, we might default unless we get 100% of what we want.